Carrion, a reverse horror game that you play as a horrific parasitic monster. One of the anticipated games since last year's reveal trailer on June 2019. You know, for an indie game that managed to make this kind of horrific, devilishly satisfying game, it's rather quite impressive. The fluidity and agile movements, the game's amazing art design, the ton of possible given ways to execute the enemy are also satisfying, as well as the puzzles and enemies that you'll be encountering within the game can be challenging. Despite of it, unfortunately, the game has a bit of drawbacks that I'll be talking about it later on. Now the question, is this indie game really worth buying for? This is K1PM, and today I'll be talking about a unique particular indie game that was just released months ago. Gonna talk about more in depth what the game is all about, and if this indie game really worth buying for. Carrion was made by Phobia Game Studio, an indie game developer that made their first game, Butcher, way back on 2016. Now Carrion being as their second game release is a huge feat they managed to pull it off, focusing more on the quality of the gameplay, art design, and atmosphere within it, making the player what it truly feels like to be that feared monster that we curiously wanted to be. You start out as a little parasite out from a capsule. Break yourself free, and later on you could explore throughout the different parts of the facility, as well as devour some people along the way. The game shows you a bit on how the controls works out. No annoying spoon feeding within the game, and there's no one to guide you all throughout. And that's actually a good thing, to be honest. You'll have to explore and discover for your own on the things you could possibly do. Opening doors, understanding on how the people behave, throwing stuffs at them, smashing stuffs, solving puzzles, etc. Giving the player more creative ideas. Whether you just want to go in rampaging in front of them, or be that cunning devilishly monster that you always want to be, slowly picking them off one by one as you devour them all beneath your jaws. Or you could just corner them off helplessly crying in fear. As for me, I wanted to savor my time devouring them all one by one. Personally, I even made a rule for myself that I have to devour every human in sight. That's the joy of playing a monster game. Though it's not like humans are the only ones you'll have to deal with. There's also a bunch of AI drones that'll try to exterminate you. You'll even have to face against armed mech units around the facility. As you explore around the facility, you'll be unlocking several different abilities. Abilities that help you get across different areas, and more ways to execute your enemies. Depending on the stage of your growth, would be the type of ability that you have. That means there are times where you'll have to change its size in order to pass a certain area or defeat enemies more easily. The bigger you are doesn't always mean you'll be more advantaged when it comes to fighting, as the size can be actually a burden for you to get caught easily. You can either go cloaking that enables you to pass through laser tripwires, web shots that can push a lever from afar or pummel your enemy to the ground, Echolate to search for a nearby biomass or checkpoints, fully charge at the enemy, harpoon them to death, etc. One of the coolest ability above them all was the parasitism, where you'll be able to manipulate an enemy at will and could do every action what the enemy can do. You can even ride on mechs with it and blast your enemies to smithereens. From time to time, there are some instances where you'll be blocked within the game, forcing you to find a specific ability first in order to go across on a certain area. Which it's not bad, you'll just have to find those parasites within capsules for you to gain those abilities, right? But here's the catch. Considering how huge the facility is and those confusing one-way pipes around the area, it's rather hard to navigate around the place without a given map. That's one of the game's huge drawbacks. You could watch a ton of videos online, and most of them, on their first blind playthrough would get them absolutely lost in a certain area. I mean, I'm used to these kind of games of a Metroidvania platform-like kind of level design. Sometimes I don't even have to look at the map for me to navigate myself within the area. But in Carrion's case, that doesn't work out properly. The level has a lot of one-way pipes laying around within the game that ends up getting too repetitive, to be honest. To the point you could easily get lost when backtracking at the game. What more if you don't plan to play the game continuously, right? It kinda gave me a bit of a nostalgic feeling of playing Another World on the SNES or Heart of Darkness on the PS1 back in the days. I mean, not exactly the same, but that same feeling of just playing the game. Oh, and as a personal opinion of mine, they should have created a facility a bit more natural, to be honest. It feels like the whole place is a confusing labyrinth of some sort. Sure, in some cases, you'll come across rooms filled with office stuffs, lab equipments, toilets and such. But it feels somewhat missing for a playable monster game. It doesn't have such scenarios where people are on a break, such as enjoying a snack on the side, or a pack of cigs to loosen up the stress. Though they do have some people pooping on the side there, which is nice, but that's just it. Talk about a missed opportunity there, to be honest. Unfortunately, the game is rather short. I finished the game for 3 hours, 56 minutes, and 7 seconds. Though I'd probably finish the game less than that if I weren't fooling around that much. You could actually see on my blind playthrough of the video that I tend to experiment on things and play with my enemies. I even intentionally die at times just to redo a certain part that I wanted to execute my enemies more swiftly. And still, I managed to finish the game within 4 hours. I know what you might be thinking. Sure, the game is short, but the gameplay is really interesting. Perhaps it's that kind of game where you replay the game just for the fun of devouring enemies, right? That should be the case if you can bear with the whole getting lost thing from time to time, making the game's replay value a bit questionable, to be honest. Now, the story within the game is rather okay. Every time the player goes in within these save checkpoint parts in the game, it'll trigger a short flashback. Whereas a group of people investigated a certain facility, these short moments where the player controls a certain human seem like much of a short break from all the whole devouring of humans along the way and such. Though I kinda wish they should have added a bit more flair on it to make it more interesting at least. There are a few secrets within every level on the game that give some minor buffs if you want to get that 100% completion kind of challenge, and I guess it's alright. But other than that, getting those secrets wouldn't change that much, to be honest. It's already a hustle having to retrace my steps back. There's also another problem that I really hate when fighting off an enemy mech. Why can't I hit them with other objects that I throw at them? I mean, come on, it doesn't make sense. I know it's a bit nitpick part, but it kinda breaks the immersion a bit. The only tactic I have is to pull its parts one by one. Or ride on a different mech to blast the enemy off, supposing there's another one around. Or use Harpagoria to launch several harpoons at the enemy mech till it's destroyed. While the AI within the game isn't exactly the smartest. Kinda rather simple, to be honest. Or how the AI is incapable of guarding or staying away at a certain area that I've been through. The game feels less challenging that way. The ending, however, it was kinda anticlimactic, to be honest. Managed to get back that human DNA form that somehow it got lost from the start, and actually managed to use it to get myself out from the facility. I mean, they made an ending somewhat of a subtle foreshadowing of a second game. Whereas in the parasite you controlled managed to get off from the facility, and now would probably gonna terrorize the whole city, or so how I think that's the case. You know, I was really expecting that there would be a huge battle before I could escape it all, but there wasn't. I kinda wish they could have done better or done more than that. That's why I give this game a rating of 7.3 out of 10. The game isn't what I exactly hoped for. Sure, I really love the fluidity or how agile the parasite is, and the way how I manage to execute my enemies as if it were in a horror movie. But the cons within the game can really be frustrating. You can already easily get lost within the game when you have to backtrack on a certain stage. This problem could have been avoided if they just have a map within the game, at least for the sake of conveniency. Making those secrets that you want to get at the start is somewhat of a chore that you have to search for. It's that kind of game where you have to play the game non-stop in order to enjoy the game fully. If not, you'll probably get frustrated at some point for getting lost around the area. Sure, the art design within the game is really lovely, but the layout within the map can be confusing with all the track backing places and pipes around the area. It kind of feels like the whole place is a labyrinth of some sort instead of an underground facility. Now, is the game still worth buying for? It depends, to be honest. If you wouldn't mind on the whole confusing layout of the map and how short the game is, then perhaps it's all good. Still, that unique experience of playing an indie game such as that isn't all too bad, to be honest. I'd probably still recommend you on playing the game, despite how short the game is. So, what do you think about the video I made? If you want to see more game reviews such as these, or old games of the past, be sure to subscribe and stick around my channel. You can also follow me on my Twitter page for updates on the things I talk about, or you could actually see one of my 3D models I do from time to time there. And again, this is K1PM, and I bid you farewell.